Guys, it's Lost in Plot. Welcome. We're here with the big one today, the sci-fi epic, Dune.
That's right. I think before we start, we should set the table. I'm not familiar at all with Dune. I haven't read the book, and I haven't seen the earlier film that was made.
Me neither.
So we are completely fresh coming into this film, coming into this story. So let's talk about that first. Let's talk about story first. This is really the prototypical hero's journey kind of story.
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
The plot is we've got this House Atreides has been given this world that has a very valuable resource in spice. They are now in charge of it. They're going in there and they will become extremely powerful and wealthy if they can produce it and sell it. But there's another very powerful house out there, Harkonnen, that is coming, used to have it, and is going to try and take it back.
So a bit of political intrigue. One of the interesting choices they made is they tell you right up front that when House Atreides is given this planet, this stewardship, that the Emperor's only doing it because he has misgivings about the strength of these houses and wants to pit them against each other in order to weaken House Atreides. So rather than that being like a reveal later in the story, you get it right up front. Did you know this is not a great situation for them?
Yeah, so that is the plot. Going back to the hero's journey, we've got Paul, who is our protagonist, and he's really has two different destinies laid out before him at the start of the film. His father's destiny is he wants him to rule House Atreides. His mother has the more interesting one, I think, in that she's got an entirely different destiny planned out for him, which is to become some kind of galactic messiah.
A mystic of sorts, someone who can span the gaps of space and time with his brain power.
So the thing that you notice right off the bat is this thing looks gorgeous. I was in love with the first act of this film. I thought everything was compelling. The visuals were just astounding. Every frame here, you can see the money on the screen. It looks gorgeous. There's things you haven't seen before. The art design is just top-notch. It's some of the best I've seen in a while.
Totally immersive, and it feels like when they land on Arrakis, this planet which has this coveted natural resource, you really feel like you're there, experiencing it as the characters do, and it really, for me, that was the best sequence of the film, is where you're just kind of familiarizing yourself with the surroundings. The imagery is gorgeous, and it feels transportive, like you're actually journeying to this place.
It's big. It's so big, it might even be too big. So if we're going to talk about maybe some of the negatives about it now, it's like the length of this film. It is very, very long, at 2 hours and 35 minutes, and it feels every bit of that. And I think they outran their story a little bit too.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. One of my big critiques with it is it's awfully short on story. The story beats are few and far between, and over 2.5 hours, that's stretching it.
Yeah, and they are also perfunctory, because we've got this theme going on where Paul can actually see things in the future. He has all these visions. So for the first act, we're getting all these visions of the second and third act, and we kind of know what's coming. So we're kind of just waiting there for them to happen.
That's right, and these aren't just like odd glimpses of abstract images from a future. These are like important stuff like character deaths or important meetings and places and things like that, where you know it's like, well, he's...
And it pulls you back from getting attached to characters, because you've seen bad things that'll happen to them in the future.
Yeah.
So we lose that emotion. We also lose that surprise. It's all just kind of, well, we were expecting this, and now it's here. Did we think it would go like that? Yeah, probably. That's what he saw. And I missed that. I missed like the surprise. I missed the excitement. I missed the drama and the relationships, because I couldn't get invested, and I wanted to feel more of that emotion. And for me, it kind of wasn't there.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And one of my other big critiques that I have on this film is a lack of character development. There's very, very little. To be fair, the world changes a lot.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But the characters don't. Particularly the protagonist doesn't show a whole lot of character development from where he starts and where he finishes. And to me, that makes the film overall feel very slight, and when we're dealing with very limited story beats at the same time, it's not a full story, and it's not a very satisfying.
The theme is really him overcoming his fear and trying to choose his destiny. His father tells him early on, it's actually, we expect the father to kind of bully him into it. It's like, you have to rule, you have to take over, but instead he's just like, well, find your own way to it. And even if you don't want it, you're my son, and that's enough for me. It's like the opposite of what we'd expect. His mother is like, no, you're the Messiah, so be the Messiah. That's more of an interesting relationship between him and his mother, I thought. But this protagonist, Paul, is kind of a passive protagonist, would you say?
Everything happens to him.
He
He's
is
not
not
making a lot of
choosing,
choices.
yeah.
The whole story basically happens to him.
He's not driving it.
What's worse is none of the story is driven by his flaws, nor really his strengths. I mean, he comes at you fully formed as a very skilled and competent fighter.
Right.
And he can kind of handle everything that's thrown at him. There's, attempts on his life that he's able to handle, and he gets himself out of tight spots, and he does battle and acquits himself very well.
He has to be pushed into things. Like, he doesn't
Correct.
even want to train to fight at the beginning. He just has to kind of be forced into it. And it's kind of the way it goes through most of the film. And when you've got a passive protagonist, it can be a little bit, I don't want to say boring, but it can be that.
Yeah,
it's not
it
as
can
compelling.
be boring. It's not interesting, and it's not engaging because you're not really afeard of this person. You can't relate to any of the flaws that usually makes a character interesting. He doesn't have very many flaws. He really doesn't.
No. So I think that's all that we've got for story for Dune. There are some outstanding performances, just all up and down the board. Everybody nails their character. I think especially Rebecca Ferguson. I thought she was very, very good playing his mother. And I liked all the cast in this film, and it looks gorgeous. But is it dead or alive?
It's got to be dead because it's not a full story. I'm sorry, but there's other film trilogies that we've had that will give you
Like
with
Star
each,
Wars, like Lord of the Rings. This is
Exactly.
the first chapter. Is it enough in the first chapter for you?
No, because with each of those trilogies that you've mentioned, you get a full story with each entry. You get a beginning, middle, and end. You get character development that signifies a beginning point, an end point, a transition. With this one, you don't. It's almost impossible to criticize it because you haven't been given the full story.
Right.
This is not a standalone film. It cannot work by itself. It will depend upon the subsequent entries to either justify it or not, because we just haven't been given the full story.
Okay. Do you have a number for it?
I'd almost give it an incomplete. It's hard to really assign a number to it because it's almost certainly going to be subject to change based upon whatever comes after
Whatever
it.
comes next,
So
you might come back to it.
Yeah, I guess I've got to give it a 5 out of 10. It's solidly crafted. It's solidly acted. It's definitely overlong for the story, so I think there's room for improvement from a directorial standpoint.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'm right in that range too, but I'm going to keep it alive at a 6 out of 10. So not very different, but for me, it's just so well made, from the sound to the art design. Everything is just outstanding, but I wanted it to be better story-wise. I wanted to feel that emotion, and I felt like I was on the outside of things for a lot of it, and that was disappointing. Now, if you've read the novel, this kind of feels like reading a novel, but you're watching a film. It like, structure-wise, it almost kind of felt to me a bit like a novel. So maybe you'll really be satisfied with this interpretation of Dune, because they do cram a ton in there, but it's not really progressing story. It's kind of these extra world buildings and things along those lines without any big story development.
And it lacks that emotional wallop. You go to movies because movies want to make you feel a certain emotion. They want to thrill you. They want you to be scared.
Invested in the characters.
Yeah, and this doesn't have it. There's some thrilling atmospheres and things to look at. It's very nice to look at, and you're thrilled looking at it. But when it comes to the actual emotion of the characters, I wasn't particularly attached to any of them.
Yeah, and they give you that warning right at the start of the film when it says Dune Chapter 1. So we'll see. Maybe Dune Chapter 2 really redeems a lot of this stuff and makes it all feel more compelling looking back at it. But this is where we're at after Chapter 1 of Dune.
There it is, guys. If you got your own thoughts and feedback, please leave it in the comment section down below. If you like this video, leave us a thumbs. If you loved it, consider a subscription. Check us out on Twitter, and we'll see you all back on the next one.